President wants to accelerate the process. It seems the Pentagon's pretty unhappy. It's quite a significant moment for the Afghan campaign because, in effect, the Western powers are arguing about their exit strategy, how to balance the military campaign with the effort to promote some kind of stability. Lucy Morgan-Edwards was a political advisor to the EU ambassador in Kabul. She was a journalist there for quite a long time and has written a book called The Afghan Solution. We're also joined in the studio by Sir Sherrod Cooper-Coles, a former British ambassador in Kabul and many other places, author at the moment of his book Cables from Kabul. Lucy Morgan-Edwards, you talk about an Afghan solution. Pretty optimistic.
Yes, well, the solution I'm talking about is a solution that was offered in 2001 by someone called Commander Abdul Haq, who was at that stage a very well-known national figure. And he was aiming to make an internal solution with the ex-king. And he'd already, in the run-up to September 11th, made a lot of deals with various tribal elders and senior Taliban at the time.
And that's the political process that you think was unravelled by the way the West pursued its policies in Afghanistan?
Yes, they did it. They did the opposite of what he asked them to do. They bombed Afghanistan, which meant that all the people he'd done deals with effectively had to melt away, leaving the more radicalised Taliban manning the guns, the Arabs and the Pakistanis and so on.
And do you believe that the campaign was effectively lost at that point?
Yes, it was lost very early on. It was lost in 2001 and then in 2002 when we legitimised the warlords at the Loya Jirga.
And so the implication for that is whatever we do now, it's just a question of a very messy exit strategy. That's your view?
I think absolutely, and we've just gone bad to worse, making deals with corrupt warlords and making an extremely unstable situation and working with warlords that we should have indicted at the beginning.
Well, let's bring Sherrod Cooper-Coles in here. From your perspective, do you accept that general line of argument?
Yes, I'm afraid I do, and Lucy really understates it. I mean, over the last year, since General McChrystal left, General Petraeus has trebled the amount of bombs dropped on Afghanistan, trebled the number of special forces strikes. If we want to leave this country in any sort of decent state, we know our troops will come out of combat by 2015. We need to be winding down the violence, not winding it up.
And what is left of the political process, Lucy, that you talk of, in your view, having been botched at the beginning or indeed even before 9/11?
I think there's nothing left of that political process.
It's gone.
It's gone completely. I mean, frankly, I think that there's no hope for Afghanistan now. I think that, we certainly have to demilitarise our approach. I think it's been a complete obsession with the surge, which shows an utter ignorance of Afghan society and really is, it's just creating bad will and radicalising the youth and those that we need to start talking to if we want to really try to start winding down.
And are talks of that kind, people talk about talking to the Taliban, Sherrod Cooper-Coles. I mean, is it possible to see a way forward to any kind of political stability, or is Lucy right in saying, actually, the chance was lost, and in fact things have got worse?
Well, I fear Lucy may be right, but we've got to try to prove her wrong, and to the great credit of the American administration and to the great credit of David Cameron, who got this as soon as he came into office a year ago, we've got to try to get an internal political process going of the kind Lucy described. And then even more important, Mrs. Clinton has got to roll up her sleeves, get her skates on, to mix metaphors, and get the regional powers together, because each of them, Pakistan, India, China, Russia, has its clients inside Afghanistan. Afghans understand that wars end by talking, by a jirga, by sitting round in a great Islamic
Well, everyone
shura.
now accepts that a military solution isn't possible. Isn't that the case?
Well, I wonder if General Petraeus yet accepts that. I mean, he's talking about breaking the momentum, breaking the back of the insurgency. But with 3 years to go, ramping up the violence is not wise. It may be good politics. It's extremely poor strategy.
Do you think in that sense, Lucy Morgan-Edwards, although you think the game is lost, I don't use that phrase lightly, that President Obama is probably right to try to accelerate the withdrawals, whatever the Pentagon says?
Yes, I think he has to win that argument. He certainly has to start winding down. And I agree with Sir Sherrod, there has to be some type of a jirga. But the problem is that the political architecture, as we've created it since 2001 and 2002, is that we have allowed the warlords to effectively hijack the state. And these were people who were in exile during the Taliban because they were so unpopular during the early 1990s. And they're still going to be pulling the levers of power if we have a jirga. And, unfortunately, there's some way, we have to find some way of lessening their power, but we don't really have the credibility to do that now because we didn't have a process of accountability at the outset.
You were nodding during that.
Yes, I think the key question, Jim, is not how many troops leave Afghanistan, but how many troops leave the battlefield. And there may be a way through for the politicians on this, to leave troops in the great base areas at Bagram and Bastion, but get them off the battlefield. And that's the trick, to start winding down the violence. And if the generals say they want to leave more troops behind than the politicians judge may be wise, leave them behind by all means, but get them out of fighting, out of inflicting violence on the wretched Afghan people.
So Sherrod Cooper-Coles, and in Geneva, Lucy Morgan-Edwards, author of The Afghan Solution. Sherrod Cooper-Coles' book, Cables from Kabul. Thank you both very much.